One of the best Star Wars stories ever written was an April Fool's Day joke. April Fool's Day can be a source of fake news and false promises for Star Wars fans, but one of the franchise's best stories was released to celebrate the holiday. I'll admit to having fallen for some pretty bizarre April Fool's Star Wars articles when I was younger. The theatrical versions of the original trilogy finally coming to Blu-ray, a Jar Jar Binks movie announcement. There's no excuse for believing that one. etc. As fun as these articles can be in hindsight, they're also extremely annoying at the time of publication and contribute to the spread of misinformation, which is why Screen Rant doesn't do April Fool's posts anymore. However, I've discovered that officially sanctioned Star Wars April Fool's jokes have produced some hilarious non-canon stories, including one from 2012. I especially love this April Fool's joke because it reframes a crucial moment from the original Star Wars expanded universe. The official Star Wars canon was rebooted in 2014, relegating most of the expanded universe to Legends status. One of the most famous Legends stories is Timothy Zahn's Thrawn trilogy, which kicked off the modern EU in 1991 and still inspires new Star Wars movies and TV shows. The climactic duel of the third book, 1993's The Last Command, sees Luke Skywalker face a completely unexpected opponent, himself. Joruisk Bayoth, a mad clone of Jedi Master Joruisk Bayoth, instructed the Imperial Remnant to clone Luke from the hand he lost at Cloud City in The Empire Strikes Back. Called Luke Skywalker, the clone also wielded the blue lightsaber Luke had lost, attacking ferociously and pushing Luke to his limit. Because of how quickly he had been cloned, Luke was little more than an extension of Master Bayoth's will. Thankfully, Luke was aided by Mara Jade, the former Emperor's hand, who slowly became his ally throughout the trilogy. Emperor Palpatine's last command was for her to kill Luke Skywalker, so when she killed his clone instead, her mind was finally free of this desire. That was the last time anyone saw Luke Skywalker in the EU, until 19 years later when Timothy Zahn had an idea that on April 1st, 2012, Random House's Savuda site published an epilogue to the Star Wars Fate of the Jedi series called An Apology by Timothy Zahn. Written in the first person from Luke Skywalker's perspective, this story reveals that Mara Jade accidentally killed the real Luke Skywalker in The Last Command, and the clone has been living his life ever since. This was an elaborate plot by Grand Admiral Thrawn to have Luke take control of the new Jedi Order. That alone is enough to immediately signal that the story is a joke, as Thrawn didn't know that Bayoth created a clone of Luke in The Last Command. Even so, it's a brilliant what-if premise to explore, which Zahn takes full advantage of by including references and meta-jokes that only long-time EU readers will understand. One example is Luke having to force himself to drink hot chocolate, one of the real Luke's favorite drinks in the EU. While this is meant to be humorous, I find it incredibly interesting how Zahn recontextualizes Luke's defining EU moments through this change. The original Luke's improvised training techniques are now explained as Luke having no idea what he's doing, and he even secretly laughs with the Sith spirit Exar Kun when nobody is around. Zahn also found a way to recontextualize the actions of almost every other EU character, rather than stopping with Luke Skywalker. An Apology reveals that Thrawn replaced most of the main characters with clones. Dead characters like Prince Xizor were cloned in secret, people like Anakin Solo were replaced before their apparent deaths, and any important individual who hadn't been cloned yet was at least on a to-do list. Even Thrawn himself was cloned and replaced several times, contributing to his insanity. Longtime EU fans will find these details especially hilarious because controversial creative decisions and seemingly out-of-character moments can now be explained by clones. Luke even says, "We're really sorry about Jacen, by the way," referencing the divisive Star Wars Legacy of the Force series where Jacen Solo turns to the dark side. This would also mean some characters are actually alive, and their clones were killed off instead. Interestingly, Luke says he thinks the only originals left are Han Solo and Leia Organa, which could be referencing their fairly consistent characterization throughout the EU. The story ends with Luke retiring to Patagonia, to the palace of the former pirate Roberts, a fitting reference to multiple pirate captains assuming the same identity in The Princess Bride. Overall, this story is a lot of fun, especially for someone like me who understands most nods to the EU. The only thing that surprises me about an apology is what Zahn didn't include. One of the plot lines of the Fate of the Jedi series is young Jedi Knights going mad and believing that everyone around them is an imposter. Since this is presented as a Fate of a Jedi epilogue, it seems like Thrawn's clones would have been an amusing way to explain this, but I guess I should be grateful for what we got. In addition to Zahn's wonderfully comedic short story, this April Fool's joke was also presented as Del Rey announcing their plans for future Star Wars books. The biggest reveal is a series called Star Wars: The Clone Wars 2, complete with book covers sporting a nearly identical logo to Star Wars: The Clone Wars. The post says the 9-book multi-author series are over, only to assure fans that TCW 2 will be a series with no end. The first novel of this fictional series, Look, would follow the titular character uniting all the clones to conquer the galaxy. The sequel, Wookiee, which is missing an E on the cover, would then set Han Solo against an army of evil Chewbacca clones, forcing him to kill his best friend multiple times. Subsequent books would reveal that supposed continuity errors from past stories were red herrings for a 17-part subseries called Son of Clone Wars. The article gets even more specific by claiming that the 17th novel of Son of Clone Wars would show Luke traveling back in time to the Clone Wars era to fight Anakin Skywalker, Obi-Wan Kenobi, and the Grand Army of the Republic. It would introduce clones like Qui-Gon Jinn and Obi-Wan Kenobi, all while the regular CW2 Unending series is happening. Zahn humorously quotes himself by calling this the goal of all professional writers: steady work. There's no denying how ridiculous this April Fool's joke is, but that's why I love it so much. Being a comedic, non-canon story gives Zahn the freedom to explore wild ideas and lovingly make fun of certain aspects of the EU, something Star Wars readers would appreciate. It makes me wish that Star Wars writers did more stories like this, and I have a few ideas on how they could. Cloning is just as relevant now as it was in Legends, so I'd love to see an author put their spin on Zahn's idea. Emperor Palpatine returned in Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker thanks to cloning, and Star Wars: The Bad Batch revealed that he had been working to achieve this since the early days of the Empire. Palpatine's lair on Exegol also had multiple Snoke clones and even Luke's hand, creating lots of potential for clone shenanigans. If we want to stick with Luke's clone as a main character, then this would be a brilliant way to address the problems some fans have had with his characterization in recent years. The odd facial CGI in The Mandalorian Season 2 could be a cloning defect. Luke's somewhat cold and robotic delivery in the Book of Boba Fett could be a flaw in the clone's personality, and clone madness could be why Luke considered killing his own nephew. Mark Hamill has stated how he had to think of Luke as Jake Skywalker when filming The Last Jedi, so why not take that literally by making Luke a clone? Then the more positive version we see in The Rise of Skywalker could be the real Luke's Force ghost returning to fix his clone's mistakes. It's definitely a long shot, but Timothy Zahn has given me a new taste for comedic Star Wars stories. So, happy April Fool's Day.